Global South. I have two guests with me. I'm going to moderate this debate. My name is Kirsten, and I'm an activist both in Baltic Pipe Nej Tak, which is a Danish gas struggle against a gas pipe that's currently being built. I'm also part of Global Aktion, which is a political solidarity organization, which is part of organizing this event. But the two main speakers today is Esteban, who is from Argentina, who is a co-founder of EcoLeaks, which published restricted documents regarding fracking, which meant that you had to leave your country and is now living in Germany. You're going to talk much more about that. And Luisa, you also live in Germany, and you're part of Ende Gelände and also organize around gas and but I think we should just get started. And I think I would like to hear from you, Esteban, a bit about your personal history with gas and what are key moments in your life when you chose to work with gas.
Yes, thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting us. Thanks to Global Aktion and Mats for all the work of bringing us here. I think this is a historic moment to talk about the subject because gas is now in everyone's mouth, everyone's minds, and it's being sold as the transition fuel of the future when it couldn't be anything farther from that. And my personal story is one example of the many people that are suffering the consequences of what gas really does to people and the planet, and that's why it's so important for me to be able to share this with you here now. I come from Argentina. I'm a scientist. I moved to the countryside to build an eco project in the west side of Argentina, and it just so happened that this was part of the world's second largest shale gas basin in the world, which is called Vaca Muerta. It's about the size of Denmark, huge, and it's also the fourth largest shale oil basin in the world, and it's home to the indigenous people of the Mapuche, and it's being fracked. Shale means unconventional oil and gas, and in order to get that out, you need to use fracking. For whoever doesn't know fracking, you don't have it in Denmark for good reasons, because you stopped it many years ago. Same is true for most of Western Europe, yet it's your very companies from Europe that are leading the way in destroying our homelands in the Global South to drill for more gas and also oil, but gas is a relevant topic right now. That's why it's so important to bring this up. So I was an activist, but I was in the new frontier of fracking in Vaca Muerta, in a province that had not yet been affected by that. And when that came, we had to take some action, so we were able to find a secret study. There was an environmental impact study that the government was hiding because the first few wells of fracking were already shown to be contaminating the water tables of the province of the name of the province is Mendoza. And a whistleblower from within the government leaked this to us. And we thought, well, I was always inspired by WikiLeaks, so we thought to create EcoLeaks in a very low-tech fashion, because we just needed a platform to leak that material. And when we leaked that, it really led to building a mass movement against fracking. Mendoza has a very unique history that I'm not going to go in for the sake of time, but people defend the water because it's a desert area. And so it was really very powerful. We built a mass movement with tens of thousands of people, but also led to a lot of persecution and death threats. That's what happens in the Global South when you resist against all of this. So what is happening is that Europe is exporting, it's outsourcing its emissions to the rest of the world, it's outsourcing fracking to the rest of the world to continue exploiting for gas, oil, minerals. Colonialism continues to this day, but the reason I'm here is not just to complain. It's also that this is all a major part of the climate crisis. Fracking is a leading cause of methane emissions that I will explain a little later. But it's not just for our survival of the peoples in the Global South that is important for the Danish to take action against Total and against so many other companies and against the LNG and the gas that is coming, because gas is not a clean fuel. Gas is worse than coal. I will explain more later about these things. but just buying this narrative that gas is clean will seal the fate of humanity. Gas is the last fossil fuel frontier, the last fossil fuel battleground, where the media and all the multinational companies have put so much money into making you believe that it's a clean fuel when it's the total opposite. So I'll talk more about that later.
Thank you. And Louisa, I would love to hear more about, because you're also in the struggle against gas, tell more about your Ende Gelände, what's your work concerning, and why did you choose to work with gas in the first place?
Sure. So, to be honest, I was one of the people who had absolutely no idea about gas and the consequences of it, and it happened that I was organized with Ende Gelände. Does anyone know here Ende Gelände? Some? Ende Gelände is like a German movement that started, maybe I give a little bit of context, then it makes more sense to tell the story basically. Ende Gelände was founded in 2015 and was in Germany and was one of the leading anti-coal movements of Germany, which introduced civil disobedience movement in Germany at least, and had a big influence on movements across Europe. And they were very influential on politics as well, to make coal a problem. We have I think, the biggest coal mine, open pit mine, coal mine in Europe, which is the biggest CO2 emitter in Europe. And so they basically organized to go into mines, I think at the peak mine were 7,000 people all together going into the mines to stop the diggers for a couple of hours, couple of days at least. And then there was this, if you want to call it a historic moment, where governments decided to end coal by 2038, which is a huge failure because it's way too late. But it was very clear that coal, at least on a discursive level, was dead. Everybody knows now, and everybody knew back then also, that coal is really bad for the environment, coal is destroying environments and so on. So Ende Gelände came to this point. Also, we were very known to the police. The police was already greeting us see you next year. So it was really a moment of, okay, we kind of have to reinvent ourselves because people know that coal is bad, and even though the digger is not, the mine, due to its capitalist logic, cannot just stop. It's a fossil fuel industry, capitalist industry, which cannot just shut down in its own logic in a way. So we had to kind of reinvent themselves, and gas was becoming such a political important topic that they decided, a lot because of the influence of Esteban as well, to bring this topic to the narrative. And they said, well, this is the new fight that we have to fight. And also because as a movement we have actually the chance to stop something, to stop expansion. With coal, we said, people said okay, it's kind of done, even though it's still being extracted. And now with the war, we can see that for Germany, for example, is how do you say, part of or one reason why in Colombia, for example, they want to open a new coal mine, even though Colombia has the biggest one in the world. I think it is. So coal is definitely not that, but on a discursive level, it's kind of that. Yeah, Ende Gelände decided, okay, let's try gas. And in the first year they did it, I think it was 3 years ago. It was the first year of the pandemic, and it was really a disaster. People were chilling on the pipes and in the pipes, and then police evicted them. And it was really it was not this Ende Gelände feeling of going into the mines and being really radical and putting your body in front of these huge diggers. And so this is something that led to a little bit of a frustration in a way, because it was, the activists didn't have the feeling anymore that they had the power to stop something. And this was when, for me personally, it made me realize, okay, this is actually, gas is a perfect tool of showing the coloniality of gas extractivism or fossil fuel extractivism, because the reason why we don't have this nice action picture and we don't feel okay, we can stop it, is exactly because the extraction is not happening where we have the European activists. It's happening in Argentina, it's happening in lots of countries of the global south, where they frack and where they extract and where the consequences are borne by the people there. And this confronts us with a lot of difficulties, because you have to get this into people's minds. You are confronted, even within your own movement, you are confronted with a very deep Eurocentrism. Okay, so why should we care about this? Why should we care about the international perspective? And why is it exactly that we have to organize on the international level for that? And even within Europe, it's like, but we need this for our own goods. We need this to heat our homes. In Germany, we all heat our homes with gas. So this was maybe to sum it up. I think it's just a perfect tool to show how colonialism works and also how colonialism perpetuates inside our own movement. So even though it's a big challenge to organize against gas, I think it's a big opportunity to show the hidden structures behind gas extractivism.
Thank you. So you talked about like the discourse around gas, and Esteban, you also talked about gas as a transition fuel, or at least that's how it's being branded. So could you just explain a bit more, like what is this discourse about? Why is gas being talked about as a transition fuel, and why is it wrong?
Because out of sight, out of mind. You know, gas burns cleaner than coal in your kitchen. It's transparent, it looks clean, so you don't see that it comes stained in the blood of the people of the global south, where it's being extracted mainly through fracking. So there is a big, this is the biggest fraud of the century. This is the biggest climate fraud that we have yet to fight, because they are trying, if you go to the website of Total, Shell, BP, Wintershall, Equinor, you will see, and these are the biggest in the world, ExxonMobil. We are leading the world in the energy transition with gas, with LNG, which means liquefied natural gas. So you're getting a lot of this in Europe from the Americas. The US is leading the way in fracking, but they're not fracking New York or the big, the big areas that are rich. They're fracking the native indigenous people's lands, same in Canada, and they're totally destroying them. For whoever doesn't know this, fracking is a leading cause of cancer, leukemia, earthquakes, desertification. It's just total. It's like waging war on the planet and humanity, and it's a major cause. It's a major source of methane emissions. So the scientific studies have shown that fracking is responsible for more than half of all increased methane emissions globally from the fossil fuel industry over the last decade, or more than 1/3 of the total increase when you take into account all sources of methane, including biological sources. So can you tell me how is it possible that the Danish government and the EU were at COP signing and championing the global methane pledge last November? The global methane pledge is committing to reducing methane emissions by 30% by the end of this decade. But now they're doing the exact opposite. They are expanding the production of fracking because of the war in Ukraine with Russia. We're entering a new Cold War of energy. Fossil fuels are behind this war, and replacing this with gas from the Americas and from Africa is not going to solve the problem. Denmark should be leading the way by example, but you're not. I'm sorry to say, your University of Copenhagen is hosting Total tomorrow to teach us how they're leading the transition. Total is one of the biggest climate criminals in the world. They are leading a company fracking Vaca Muerta. They destroyed Mozambique, militarized the gas fields. They're fucking up everywhere in the world, and your university is hosting them. So I think we owe them a visit tomorrow. And this is a shameful example of how in one of the richest countries of the world that could actually put their money where their mouth is not doing that. I think you guys have a responsibility here, and I'm not going to put more pressure than already you feel on your shoulders, because I know we're preaching to the choir here. But if there is a country in the world that could afford to lead by example, it should be fucking Denmark, no? So how about we try to make that happen? So methane is, Total is leading fracking. Fracking is leading methane emissions. Gas is not a clean fuel. And when you take into account all of this, the emissions of gas are similar to coal. It's just that it's mostly methane, it's not CO2. But methane is 87 times more potent than CO2 in its global warming potential over the first 20 years on the atmosphere. So it's 87 times more powerful than CO2. So, and they also have agreed, the UN, the IPCC, COP, they have agreed that methane is the easiest thing to cut. That if we cut fast enough, it's going to afford us a chance to revert a little bit of the climate or delay the climate crisis somewhat. But they're not doing that. They're doing the exact opposite. They're financing, subsidizing for Total and all the other companies to drill for more gas all over the world. And it's something that we just cannot allow to continue if you guys also want to have a future here in Europe.
Yeah, and I mean, Denmark is doing more than just funding and hosting Total. We are also expanding our own fossil fuel and building fossil gas infrastructure. As we speak, Baltic Pipe is a fossil gas pipe, and it's going to be standing finished after the new year. So, Louisa, I would like to go back to some of what you said about how gas ties into colonialism. Could you just further explain, like, why is gas also a colonial struggle?
Yeah, sure. I think that was a little bit what I was trying to explain, that exactly like that the profits of the gas extractivism come to the centers of power of capitalist power of the global north, to Europe, to companies from the global north, and the costs are being borne by indigenous people, by black people, by people of color in countries of the global south and global north. I mean, we have also the global south in the global north in a way. So this is just a tool, basically, also to keep people in poverty, to destroy their livelihoods, and they have to go into forced labor. Sometimes they have to, it's just a way of colonialization that is continuing, that has been going on for decades with oil, with coal, and they are now then transitioning to gas slavery, if you want that in a way. But I think the essence of it is just that the profits are being borne by rich countries and rich people, and to the deficit of the people in the global south.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot to do with also being very much in a bubble. Like, people in Germany are in a bubble. I hear in Denmark is similar. It's really hard to see something that is happening so far away from you. So, but all the consumption that is happening here is coming from the exploitation of the people of the global south. And I think unless we can come together internationally, globally, and find a way to connect the dots, there's no way out, because otherwise you will end up fighting bubble fights of Denmark that are really a joke compared to the struggles of the people that are dying so that you could have your gas and your oil and your luxuries here in Germany or in Denmark or in Europe.
Can I add to that? Because I think that's really important to come together on an international level, especially with gas. To give you an example, in Germany, for example, we went from having 0 liquefied natural gas terminals to now, since the war has started, the war against Ukraine has started, we are discussing 12 new liquefied natural gas terminals, which for a lot of people in the US, for example, in the US from indigenous territories, is really, really bad news. When they hear when they hear this, it's like, okay, very, very difficult times are ahead of us, because Germany is one of the biggest importers also of gas and of fracked gas. And I think the reason why this is so important is also for the movements, especially also for leftist movements. In a lot of cases, we are always a step behind. We're always criticizing. We're always like, we want this to stop. We want this to be reversed. We want something else. But with gas and with LNG terminals, for example, we really have the chance to be a step ahead. We can prevent something from happening. We can actually say, like, we don't want these terminals, we don't want any fossil fuels, we need to get out, and not just to get into renewable energies, but really restructure our entire energy production system to become decentralized, to become a self-determined energy transition, not just to shift into renewable energies, because they come also with a lot of problem, ecological and social problems, but really to restructure our energy production. And I think if we do it with gas, we can actually be a step ahead of that.
Yeah, I agree. It feels like a really hard time to be like a gas activist, especially with the war in Ukraine. And I feel like there's a major shift in narrative around gas with this war. And you touched upon it briefly, but I think we should go into more further. Like, what consequences does this war have on the gas industry and on the gas market, and how we talk about gas and the impact it will have on the future?
Yeah, well, I know we're all really exhausted, no? Anyone not exhausted from activism the last few years? Raise your hand. Like, there's no one. No? We're all fucked. Like, really tired, demoralized, depressed. Plenty of actions that don't have any impact. Plenty of actions that are not coordinated and have no strategy at all. Of course, you're going to have no impact. So it's time to get serious and come together and actually start coordinating things together. And maybe the Global South can help, guys. Because not only do we have the most urgent survival struggles, they're killing us. But also they're killing us for you, is the companies from here, and so the extraction is coming here. So it's just fucking connect the dots. And you know, when you talk to people in the global south, you're not gonna feel depressed. They're gonna inspire you, because like my story is a tiny little bit, but you have so many people that are doing so much more, that are at the front lines, and when you listen to them, how could you afford to feel burnout? You know, in the global south, we don't even have that idea of burnout. What the fuck is that? We are fighting for survival. So I think the global south can also help unite Europe, because here people are so easily divided over little identity politics, and because I don't like Morten because of his sunglasses, or you because you're blonde, like stupid shit. Like when you're fighting for survival, you don't have time for that. And we have been doing this with you, with many of you the last few years. We built a global coalition called Shale Must Fall. The inspiration came actually from Denmark. A couple of years ago, we started the campaign Total Must Fall out of the Marktivist something school. Yeah, that you guys invited me to, and then we were planning an action against Total, and then that went global, and then we built the global anti-gas and fracking coalition. And when you listen to the testimonials of the people, like in Colombia, every other day one activist is being murdered because they're fighting fracking or some other way to defend nature. So, you know, these are very, very strong stories, very powerful stories from Namibia, where the Okavango, they want to frack the fucking Okavango Basin. It's one of the last reserves of life in Africa and in the world for wildlife and water source for millions of people, and they're going to frack that. So what we are facing is the multinationals and the fossil fuel industry that owns your governments, because I don't care whatever the fuck you say about the Danish government, it's full of shit. And the same is Norway and so on, and like, Norway is not a country. Norway is a fossil fuel company that has a country. And that company is Equinor. Yeah. And Equinor is the leading company fracking Argentina. What the fuck are they talking about with their green transition? So we need to get serious, and we need you, because you have the power that we don't have. We do big actions, but they go invisible. The media don't cover us. They don't want to talk, oh, we get repressed, or we go to jail, or we go to exile, or worse, tortured or killed. But here you don't. You can go to jail and get arrested and come out. Last year I was there with you. We occupied the headquarters of Total in Copenhagen, right? The Scandinavian headquarters. We confronted their fucking executives. They didn't have any answers to our questions. And we were arrested for a few hours and we went home. We may have a trial coming up, but it's okay. So if we could do that, so can you. And the power of it is in doing it together. Because if you do an action today, we do an action tomorrow, and there's actions all year long, everywhere. They have no coordination, no strategy. And a very wise Chinese man from 2,000 years ago said, a strategy without tactics is the slowest path to victory, but tactics without strategy is the fastest way to defeat. And what we have is plenty of tactics. Everyone's talking tactics, but no one's talking strategy, really. Like come together, okay, who is dying for this? Let's come together, talk to the Colombians. Like few groups even have calls that allow for bilingual translation, so that people from the global south could be in the calls at the same level with the Europeans. So I'm just throwing all of this at you because I think we need some radical changes in Europe as well. The biggest problem of Europe and of the world is Eurocentrism. You have ruled the world for the last 500 years, so it's naturally ingrained in people here that the solutions will only come from Europe. But I have sad news for you. Only the problems have come from Europe. So maybe the indigenous people of the global south, the people that are fighting for survival, they have a lot of great ideas, and maybe we join forces together with a little bit of humility from your side and put your power at our disposal, and we put our cause to give you the moral high ground. Then we can really tackle Total and your government and anything we want to.
Let's give that a hand. Okay, so we're talking a lot about Total, and Total is here at the Folkemøde, and I heard that there's this culture where you don't talk about the people not present. But that's bullshit. Of course we're going to talk about Total here. So Total say that their gas is clean. That's also what this event is called. clean gas is a climate fraud. And I'd just like to maybe go back a step and talk a bit more about like why is it they say it. You talked a bit about like it's because like out of sight, out of mind. But as a lot of people here are involved in this, we need tools and like how to counter that argument. So what is that argument and how do we counter it the best way?
Well, I think one big problem with that is that we need to start, also in our movement, that we need to start talking differently about climate change. Because we are just reducing climate change to a problem of CO2. And I think, of course, we have a CO2 problem that is in the atmosphere, but if we just reduce climate change to a problem of CO2, this is exactly the narrative that corporations like Total can exploit. Because then they can say, the only reason why they can say our gas is clean is because they have some bullshit, how do you call it, swapping in a way, like, okay, we're gonna plant trees to continue our gas extractivism, or what they are probably going to talk about is carbon capture and storage. Like, this is one of the main techniques by the fossil fuel industry to sell the lie of the clean gas, because what they're going to do is they're going to extract, they're going to put a scrubber on their chimneys, and they're going to extract again or withdraw CO2 from their emissions, and that's how they're going to say, well, then extractivism becomes clean, right? Because we have this circular fossil fuel production. And there are, even within the movements, even within academia, there are people like, oh, this is a really, really tough discourse to tackle, because how are we going to say no? How are we going to reveal that this is not true? Well, just by actually looking to the ground. And I absolutely hated the movie Don't Look Up, sorry for that, but there is a truth in it. Because I think we are looking up too much, actually. We are looking up too much. We're just looking in the atmosphere. We're not looking at what is happening on the ground. We're not looking what is happening to the waters. We're not looking at what is happening to the soils and the people who are living with and from the soils. And if we actually then stop to look up a little bit and look down under our feet, like what are we living on, what are we drinking, what are we eating, then it just becomes very obvious that clean gas is such a fraud, because it's just extracting it, it's contaminating groundwater, it's just destroying land, it's displacing people violently, it's killing people. The struggle is just militarized, like people are being literally killed for trying to stay on their lands and just live off the land. So I think, if we actually stop looking up that much and look down on our feet at our feet again, I think that would be a good way of countering the narrative of clean gas.
And if I may add, the testimonials of people in Namibia, Colombia, Argentina, the indigenous people in Texas, the Wet'suwet'en in Canada, they're not heard at all. Like, nobody knows about them. Maybe you here, the people here, know about them, but one thing that we need to do is to understand that, I said frontliners, put the frontliners at the forefront, all the time. Take their testimonials. Some of them will be in Spanish or another language. Just do the stuff that works, do the boring to make the Danish population listen to it. And if we all came together, XR, Global Action, Fridays for Future, Green Student Movement, and everyone was just posting this all the time on your social media channels alone would be already a great help to break the narrative, because Total cannot compete with this narrative. We have the ace of cards of narratives. It's just up to you whether you in Europe will be smart enough to understand that the narrative to defeat gas and the fossil fuel industry will come from the global south or will come from nowhere.
And maybe just in addition to that, speaking of Total and also of Russia, Russia is a great colonial power as well, also within it. Like, Russia has a lot of indigenous people living on the territories, and Total is involved in the gas extraction in Russia as well as the Yamal Peninsula, where the indigenous people of Nenets are living, and they are being displaced from their territories. They are reindeer herders, and the gas industry is just destroying the lands of the indigenous people. Their reindeers cannot have their traditional routes of grazing, and their grazelands are just being destroyed by that. And I think that is something that you can also confront Total with, to say, look, you are destroying the lives of these people. And this is also then going to counter again to say, like, well, you can't just withdraw some CO2 from your chimneys and then say we're clean, because it's just not true. You're just killing people.
One last thing. Sorry, this is just it's triggering me to say more. But thank you so much for bringing us. And I'm from Argentina, right? I'm sure there's other foreigners from the global south here, but imagine how much money is in this event. Would it be so difficult to just get next time 5 or 10 people from the front lines and give them the center stage to talk about all of this, who would have the guts to confront them? Total would run away from the festival, you know? And instead of being a greenwashing, advertising bullshit that is going on, you could turn it into something powerful by giving all the protagonism to the people at the front line. And that's what will help you defeat the narrative and maybe reach thousands of people and the media, because it's such an important event that I guess they will have to talk about it. We need to make them talk about it, because people understand this, people around the world, and also killing the future of their own children. They're going to start joining us. But this is the communicational challenge we have, and we have nothing and they have all the power. But if you put more frontliners on this stage, and let's just keep building this kind of idea, because it can be very powerful. Yeah.
We're also going to open up for questions in just a bit, so you can start thinking about if you have something you would like to know, or are we even taking the debate in the right direction? And if someone already has a question, you can start putting your hand up. Yeah, and I think you have to speak into the microphone, so you have to come up here.
Thank you so much for being here and taking your time and energy and sharing your wise, your wisdom with us. And I have a controversial question for the three of you, and I think it's important that we also discuss difficult questions when we are in this debate about energy transition. It's a puzzling question. I don't have an answer to myself, and I'm definitely not a pro, but I would like to hear your opinion on nuclear energy. I really am I'm so curious. I have been anti-nuclear energy my whole life, but I also now see the debate turning in another direction. And we all, I think, can agree that the transition is not going fast enough. And if, as you say, and I agree, we should abolish all fossil fuel, gas, coal, everything. What about nuclear energy? Do you think that there is an opportunity there? I think you're all three of you, I also like for you, Kirsten, I think all three of you are very wise on this discussion, and I need wise people to inform me on nuclear energy. Thank you so much.
Okay, so we're talking about energy deception and false green energy solutions. And gas is definitely not a clean solution, but let's take a few minutes maybe not talk about nuclear energy. And would one of you like to start? I mean, I can start because I'm quite biased because I came literally from an anti-nuclear camp in France.
The arguments. I need the arguments.
The arguments, yeah. And I can say that the reason in northern France people are organizing against, it's been chosen as a dump zone for nuclear waste, and people are organizing against it. They have a wonderful slogan being like, on a good day, it's not uglier than anywhere else here. And I think that's a really good argument. Like we don't have sacrifice zones on Earth where we can put nuclear waste. That's very clearly like an argument against the waste problem of nuclear energy, but also that it's just driving. It's driving the whole energy spiral that we need to stop. It is driving the growth spiral of us using continuously Earth resources and not living sustainably with the living world around us. And I feel like nuclear energy is definitely not the answer to some of these more structural questions. Like the UN says that we need to. Oh, I wrote this down. We need to change our technological, economical, and social spheres, and we need to change our values, paradigms, and goals of our society. And nuclear energy is just another tech fix, and does not it's a climate trap that keeps us from questioning some of these things. I think that is my opinion.
Sure. I think one reason why the industry was able to bring nuclear back to the table is actually this CO2 problem that I was talking about before. The only reason why they were able to bring nuclear back is to say, well, nuclear is less CO2 heavy on CO2. And that is just reinforcing the problem. Like climate change and environmental destruction and time system change is not just reducible to how much CO2 we produce. There are so much more problems than just CO2. And I think the biggest argument is like nothing has changed in nuclear. I'm not an expert on how exactly it is being produced, but the criticism are still the same. Then back in the days, nothing has changed apart from the discursive switch of it. They are just saying it's less. You have less CO2. We have saved nothing with it. And I think the question is just exactly what you said. It's not a question of, okay, we just need another input. We need a really radical systemic change, not only in consumption, in production, but also in distribution. And nuclear energy would just bring us more problems, maybe a little bit less CO2, but a lot of other more bullshit.
And maybe I can briefly supplement what they just said with the extraction side, which is where I come from. The province I was living in, the nearest city was a victim of the contamination of uranium extraction 20 years earlier that continues to cause high cancer rates in the population. The extraction of uranium is one of the most contaminating processes in the world. It's mega mining. And of course they don't want to do it here, so they ship it to us. So it's the most unsustainable thing you can think of. Also in Ukraine, I don't remember the name of the city, but it's a city where it's also devastated from the extraction of uranium to supply the nuclear reactor. So it's absolutely insane, and it will always imply that some places of the world you're going to turn them into sacrifice zones to get more of these materials.
And maybe in addition to that, I think it's very important, regardless of what they are going to bring as some kind of solutions, I think they're just looking at the end product, but they are never looking at the source of where the material is coming from. This is exactly why they are, for example, they are able to portray hydrogen as a green solution as well, because they're saying, well, the emission of it is just water. Well, but how is it produced? It's produced from fossil gas, most of it. So whenever an industry is portraying something as less CO2, how do you say it? CO2 heavy on CO2, whatever. Or if it's CO2 neutral, go and look at the production. Like, where does the material come from? And then you will know that it's just a lie, because they always, that's the only reason how they can portray something as CO2 neutral is by eclipsing the production side.
Now that she just said that, reminded me to tell you, gas burns cleaner than coal here, but they don't take into account the production and the extraction. And when you do that, and it comes from fracking, it's actually 40 to 60% higher carbon footprint than coal. The coal that all your governments are saying they're moving away from, they're moving into something that is 60% higher emissions than that. And when you add also the transport from the Americas to Europe on the LNG tankers, it's so contaminating, and it has something called the passive leaking of methane in the process. It adds an additional 20% carbon footprint to that gas. So it's the worst fossil fuel of all, and we are being led to believe that this is the cleanest and a transition fuel. And the reason we are led to believe that is that they are dominating the narrative. Your government and all of these institutions, the Copenhagen University, they are co-opted by the fossil fuel industry. So the narratives that we are discussing are the agenda are being set by the fossil fuel industry, and we need to find ways to set our own agenda and build enough power to challenge that narrative in a meaningful way.
Yeah, give that a hand. Panel with the United Opinion on Nuclear. There's time for questions. Any options? Like to come up last?
So thank you for a lot of nice new information. That's great. I was wondering, since you come from in the Gelände and you have this event in the beginning of August, I don't know if you participate in that in some way, but you had some considerations about it, that there's a lot of problems in the global south because we still have colonialism and stuff like that. So I was just wondering which considerations is then put into this in the Gelände event here in the beginning of August, because I was really keen of going, but I understand that you should be thoughtful about why you do it.
Okay. Of course, you should all come to Gelände. How should I put this? You're just putting the finger on the wound of all the discussions that are going on right now. We are a white-dominated movement, Eurocentric, German-centric movement as well, that is considering other European countries as their comrades and others as their guests. We are not. We have internalized racism. We have internalized colonialism. And this is going to happen in August as well. If I would just say, we figured it out. We really know how to be anti-colonialist. We are really on top of it. I would really lie, and you would be really disappointed to come. But we're really trying. And what we're doing, what we have done, a lot of people at least, what we have done is last year with Shamos 4, which Esteban really helped to build. Hi there. Which is this coalition of bringing together people globally by connecting the dots of the extractivism, by visibilizing the struggles that are going on the territories where the extraction is happening. This is something that we have done, or that we have tried at least to really visibilize it, to exchange with people, to connect to the people, to talk to them, to invite them as well to come. We had a delegation of 3 Texas indigenous people last year that came with us into the blockade in a way that they were safe, because we blocked I don't know if you saw that we blocked the busiest canal in the world, which is actually in Germany, and they were part of this action with a legal demonstration on the side where they could participate in the blockade without being in danger for it. This is something that we are trying to do this year again, to also organize internationally, to have international days of action. But for that, we also put a lot of energy, or several groups within Ende Gelände put a lot of energy into organizing events where people could learn from other struggles. We have an event series, you can all look it up. It's called Roots of Resistance: Learning from Frontline Struggles. It's online on YouTube, whenever our social media group is able to find the time to upload them. But you should be able to find them, at least our first event, where we come together with people from around the world, from Mozambique actually, from Mexico, from Chile, to talk about their fights and see what we can learn from them. And this is something that I hope will be there in August as well. But Roots of Resistance: Learning from Frontline Struggles. But yeah, I think we're just really at the beginning of a learning and an unlearning process. And I hope that in August we will make a first step into the right direction. We'll see how it goes.
Okay, thank you. So, getting more, and we have a whole hour to talk about gas, so we're really spiraling down.
Just one thing about Ende Gelände. It's great if you can come, but it's also great, or even greater, if you could do something in Denmark against the companies that are destroying the global south, because we will do a global day of action. So if you target Total, or target your banks that are heavily financing the fossil fuel and gas extraction in Mozambique and beyond, the Global Action can tell you a lot about that. We did an action in Aarhus last year as well. So be part of the action physically there or physically here. It might even be more important because you're planting a seed, and it will also help the Global South actions to be amplified in Europe as well.
And you actually have an advantage in Denmark, because we've been talking about the difference of gas consumption between Germany and Denmark. In Germany, a lot of the gas is going into heating homes. So for a lot of people, the gas discourse is a very private one and a very personal one, saying like, if you take away our gas, we won't freeze, we will be cold in winter. So this is something that is apparently not the case in Denmark. Here you have it very clear that the industry is the one that is profiting the most from gas, which is also true for Germany, but still people feel it more as a personalized thing, because also the lobby is portraying it as like, it's your home, it's your gas, you are responsible, turn down the valve or something like that. But it's actually industry that is the major player in. And you could, for example, you could also do that in Denmark with the gas pipeline that is going down to your sugar plant. You could do an action in that, really highlighting that it's the industry that is profiting most from gas extractivism. It's not your personal gain, not the individual gain. And if anyone wants actually to lead the way on that, like let's get in touch. We have this international collaboration. I think we are even in touch with Global Action as well. between Endeglande and Global Action. So if you want to also organize something in Denmark, let's get in touch and do it.
I was just thinking about these sugar pipes as well, like that part of the plan of expanding the Baltic pipe is to connect the sugar pipes with fossil gas. And I feel like it's very confusing, like Denmark is very all over on the gas struggle, like at the gas problem. At the same time as we're building more and more gas infrastructure, we're also signing like a pledge together with what country? That gas is not green and like we shouldn't use it anymore, and going out and saying that gas is not a fuel for the future. So I just like your opinion on the future. You know, is gas on the way down? Is gas on the way up? Like, where do you think we're heading?
Well, we are heading really fast. Gas is the way up by a lot. So you need to know that the US is the leading exporter of LNG in the world. They used to be one of the biggest importers. All of this is because of fracking. The so-called shale revolution in the last 10 to 15 years has led to the US being able to export so much gas. And actually Trump put it into words. He said, we are going for American energy dominance of the world. He actually called it, you know, like this is the imperialist energy strategy of the US. And what is happening with the proxy war in Ukraine is that they're using this to further expand this fossil fuel war and this fossil fuel cold war where the US really wants to make Europe dependent on its LNG. Europe is not a small player. Europe is the biggest market for gas in the world. So the fact that Europe is playing so easily when the time for Europe to actually ensure peace for itself and unity is not to fall for another empire, but to actually put all the money into renewables quickly enough to be energy independent in a just transition, not with more colonialism of extracting more and more from us. Of course it would take time, but the will to do it is not there because they are still co-opted by the fossil fuel industry, and these governments are just typing what they tell them. The lobby tell them what to do. They give them the law already written and they just approve it and pass it through the media. So it's going in the wrong direction in a bad way. The unconventional reserves of oil and gas in the world are vastly superior to the conventional ones. The reason we never reached the oil amount in the world is because fracking was developed to save the fossil fuel industry from extinction and turn us to extinction. So they're continuously discovering more and